All right, Nico, can you say welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren, a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here in San Diego, and obviously the host of this podcast. And today's discussion, I have brought on Dr. Lindsey Mathews, who is the founder and the CEO of Birthfit. If you haven't heard of Birthfit, it's a phenomenal resource that I refer to all the time. I've been doing it for years for prenatal exercise recommendations and programs, as well as postpartum, kind of ramping back up into exercise and really help heal yourself before moving back into exercise. So we're going to dive into that discussion around the do's and don'ts of prenatal exercise, mindset changes that we really want women to explore going into birth as far as what workouts mean and what they're going to do for you. And then also to really kind of put in perspective what getting back into working out, whether you're a professional athlete or just a weekend warrior, or just wanting to get back into shape after having a baby, really put into perspective what a good timeline is for that and how to go about it. So again, I've been referring women to Birthfit for years and years. I've known Dr. Lindsey Mathews professionally of her work for a long time, and this is the first time we've been able to just really kind of sit down and have a conversation about what she's doing. So I'm really excited to bring that to you. Also, if you haven't checked out the work that I've been doing for dads in this past year, and you have a partner that needs some help with this transition of fatherhood, with getting prepped in the third trimester, getting ready for birth, or really kind of orienting him to what the first few days, weeks, and months really is going to look like as a dad and as a couple, please go over to thedadhoodjourney.com and check out those resources that I've been working on. I also have another podcast, The Dadhood Journey, that is specifically for dads. So if you are a mom and want to refer them over to that, I appreciate that. Or if you are a dad listening to this, head on over and get those resources specifically for you as well. So let me introduce Dr. Lindsey Mathews to you, and then we can get to our discussion. She, as I said, is the founder and CEO of Birthfit. She's also a doctor of chiropractic, a birth doula, and a strength and conditioning coach. She started Birthfit way back in 2011 just as a blog to really help support and educate women through the motherhood transition, especially in a exercise world. But then as it started expanding more and more, Birthfit's become quite a movement. It's based out of Austin, Texas, is where she lives, but then it's blown up more and more and has more online programs, and there's places all over the country that Birthfit trainers are available for you. So with all of her knowledge that she's accumulated throughout her career, putting it into these programs, one for pregnant women and postpartum women, but she's also got an educators program coming out now for trainers and birth workers that will want to help women either in pregnancy or postpartum. She's got phenomenal programs, and I'm really, really happy to be able to have this conversation with her and share her knowledge with you. So let me now switch over to my conversation with her so you can share in that. All right, Lindsey, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Dr. J. Thank you for having me and sharing me with your community. I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, in my office, I've been sharing your work with Birthfit for a long time because it's an amazing resource. And I thought it was only natural to bring you on the podcast as well, to share it with everybody else that listens. I mean, I know you have an amazing podcast as well and quite a following there, but in my office and then within my circles, I just wanted to share the scope of what you do, which I think is so impressive and so detailed and so solid, as well as just more general information about what can help these moms that are brand new pregnant, first time pregnant, maybe third, fourth, and in the pregnancy and afterwards, because that's your wheelhouse. So I'm excited to just jump in and talk about that.
Yeah, all the things, prenatal, postpartum, movement, everything.
Yeah. I mean, because most people, when I bring up BirthFit, know it as honestly like prenatal exercise stuff. They think of
Mm-hmm.
like birth fit. I'm getting fit for the birth, which is
Yeah.
absolutely essential, but we're going to dive into the postpartum as well. But one of the things that I would love to talk about right off the bat is, I don't want to say all of the do's and don'ts of exercise during pregnancy, but a lot of the misconceptions of I can't exercise too hard, hit workouts is too much, I can't run, I can't lift, all those kind of things. So like when a woman's asking you those kind of questions, like where do you start them off with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to start with. Because it literally was the question that I started my journey with back when I started BirthFit, like 2000. I started as a blog around 2013, and it was just based on my experience as a chiropractor, coach, and a doula. And I was getting some heat because of misconceptions, like you were talking about, like, oh, you can't work out, too hard while you're pregnant. You can't lift too much, or can't get your heart rate above this or that. And so I found there were so many misconceptions out there, just like in any other, nutrition world, probably chiropractic world, and it's so similar, like the misconception game. And so that's what kind of started me down the path of like, okay, let's actually do some research into exercise in pregnancy. And I couldn't find very much. Like, I did digging and I was like, wait, there's nothing. I came across one book called Exercising Through Your Pregnancy, and it's by Dr. James Clapp, and he's an MD. And now it's probably, over 20, 30 years old. But, at the time, it was the only thing that I could find. It had great information as far as aerobic training. Like, I want to say like the jazzercise classes, or any kind of aerobics, running, cardiovascular stuff.
Okay.
But there was nothing as far as strength training.
Huh.
And so that was really baffling to me. And then I started going down rabbit holes of like, okay, don't get your heartbeat above 140 beats per minute. And I was trying to dig in and see where that came from. And I couldn't find anything on that. What I ended up finding as far as, heart rate was somebody somewhere made a blanket statement at a conference, and I believe it was an acupuncture conference, and it stuck like wildfire, and that's what carried on. Same with, the don't lift more than 15 pounds. That was a misconception I never could find the root of. And if you think about it, new moms are lifting way more than 15 pounds in their first 6 weeks postpartum immediately. If they have a handbag, if they have a diaper bag, if they have a car seat, the average handbag, I think, weighs somewhere between 5 and 8 pounds. Like, that's nuts. So we have to be able to lift more than 15 pounds just to participate in day-to-day activities. And then the other misconception that I was going to drop was the one about 6 weeks. So everybody has a 6 weeks postpartum follow-up. And at this 6 weeks postpartum follow-up, whether you're with an OB-GYN or a midwife, that's where they clear you for sex and exercise. And I couldn't find anything on this except for the average woman, her uterus shrinks down back to the average size. That was the only thing I could find. Nothing along the lines of like the tissues adequately healed, nothing. Like the diastasis, the linea alba none of that. It was based on the size of the uterus according to average women and average size. So that's kind of what got me down the rabbit hole. And at the time, I was working in the sports rehab, prehab world right after chiropractic school. And I worked at, for different athletes, different, like in Hollywood, different production. And so I would get people ready for their events or their sporting event, and then I would recover quickly, or that was the objective, efficiently and quickly.
Yes.
And so, by default, I was working with 3 other male chiropractors, and I would get women, especially women that would complain of anything women's health related, whether it be cramps or they were just returning from having a baby and they wanted to get back to their sport or their production of whatever show. And, I was like, I don't know anything. Like, I had 1 trimester in school and it was on pregnancy and pediatrics, and that was it. I took Webster, but I didn't feel like I was qualified enough, especially in the postpartum world. And then like nothing I had done had, made me feel qualified to take care of people, especially in the healing department. And that's when I kind of started my journey of anything that had the word birth, postpartum, pregnancy, any seminar, I took it. And it led me down, a bunch of rabbit holes and a bunch of kind of underground learning. And that's kind of 2013, 2014 was really when I dove head first. And I started relating a lot of what I was doing in the sports rehab world with pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and basically training for birth, mind, body, and soul is what we do. And if you think about it, like, and this is kind of what I was relating it to, and it's still, I think, a relevant analogy, is that we have these Olympic athletes or professional athletes, but especially Olympic athletes, they train 4 years for an event, like, 100-meter sprint, and it's 10 seconds. And so the average pregnancy is 40 weeks. First time pregnancy is usually around 41 weeks and some change, but the average pregnancy is around 40 weeks. And we usually don't find out we're pregnant till around 5-6 weeks at the earliest. Some people that are really in tune will find out, like 4.5 weeks, 4 weeks. But, if you spend a little bit, like just 40 hours, maybe 1 hour each week, like 40 hours is like a full-time work week. That's it, 1 work week, just preparing for birth. Right. And if you think, like, birth is the most sacred transformational event of a woman's life, and then how you heal postpartum, especially, in the first 30 days, and then 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, the first year, it has a significant impact on the health of a woman later on in life. So that's kind of like where I dove in, and then my mind was blown because I did not learn any of this growing up in America. Like, you could say I had the standard American childhood where I saw birth on TV, and that's what I equated birth to, was like water breaking, everything goes like crazy. Mom's yelling at the husband, I hate you for doing this to me, right. Take me to the hospital, that sort of thing. And so when I started studying all of this, I realized you could have a birth outside the hospital. You had choices, all of this stuff. And then, actually people all around the world worked in fields, or they did, they weren't sedentary as much as we are in America. And they moved and they stayed active throughout their pregnancy, and they had much more straightforward labors and births, and more efficient healing in the postpartum first year. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, those misconceptions definitely got me started. And just as a general rule, whenever I hear misconceptions, and I still do, now I'll get messages on social media where somebody says, my doctor told me that my baby's too big or to have a vaginal birth. Like, I still hear that one. And, first I ask, okay, what about your mom? Tell me about, like, that's really, I ask about that first. And if their mom had, vaginal births, 10-pound babies, fine, that's great. But then we start to unpack, well, why is your doctor telling you this? Are we around a holiday? What's going on? So I still hear them. I think I heard another one recently that was like, don't squat below parallel. And I was just like, why? And squatting below parallel, you're going to do that in birth, or right. Ideally you might have that option available. And that's going to open the birth canal by about 30%. So if we're not comfortable with that movement, then we're definitely not going to use that movement during labor or birth. So interesting what I hear.
Because that's something that I think really turns a light on for some pregnant women, of being fit during pregnancy is different than outside of pregnancy, for sure. Different goals and outcomes we're looking for. But at the same time, just as you said, like birthing options, like once a woman understands like that you can do birth differently than just laying on your back and trying to push uphill and movement, but your body might be called into a certain movement or position that if you don't have the strength and or the flexibility to hold, that tool is taken out of your toolbox, and you're not going to be able to birth in that way. Baby might be calling you to birth in that way, to move and wiggle just a little bit, but if you don't have that strength because you haven't done work beforehand, it could change the outcome of the birth.
Absolutely. And we always tell people, like, labor and birth, it's a dance between mom and baby. Yes. And so we practice and cultivate these movements and, training in different planes of motion so that you're comfortable in that, just like you're talking about, so that when you're called to go into, let's say, a lunge leaning on the couch, that it feels safe, like that your body, it's familiar and you've done that before. Because if, I've been in birth situations where, and this is early on in my career, I make sure people train now, but early on in my career where they had no experience with movement, and even just getting like hip circles and things like that was a foreign concept, in their body. And yeah, you got to be in your body in birth and not in your thinking brain,
Totally. And I mean, just let alone like being ready for the third trimester with all the changes that are going on, and proprioceptively, your brain understanding like how it moves in space changes day to day with all the relaxing going through your system, the incremental or the exponential growth. So being grounded and centered in your body to know how it moves then allows you, just as you said, like more freedom in the birth as well. And it sounds like, I mean, to use kind of fitness world wording, that kind of planes of motion and functional training, but adapting it specifically to birth is what a lot of women like that, again, that light bulb goes on, like, ooh, I need that. And then want to do it with people that are specially trained for it.
Yeah. And I think that's, a big thing, especially for competitive athletes, what doesn't matter what sport, is the mindset piece of like releasing that they're no longer training for volleyball or track or CrossFit or whatever, but they're in season training for birth. And so, a big thing is we don't modify whatever workout your track coach gave you or whatever workout your CrossFit coach gave you or whatever. We have specific training for birth. And we'll come back to that stuff, I promise you. We'll have, it's a base level general strength and conditioning. And I promise you, you can come back to that. The 5-6 months postpartum is about, the earliest that we'll let somebody go back to sport specific, no matter if they're the best soccer player in the world. And that's because they have to have that base level foundation, whether it be, whatever sport they're playing, and stuff's got to heal. So speaking of, like earlier when I was talking about the uterus shrinking and the healing, like if you think about, this is also kind of what blew my mind, was I tore my ACL and blew out everything in my knee. And this was, years ago, but I knew exactly what I was doing after surgery. Like I woke up and I was in that range of motion machine. I knew what I was doing 3 days later, 6 weeks later, 3 months, 9 months, I had a plan. But whether it's a vaginal birth or a cesarean birth, there's no plan, or there wasn't a plan until BirthFit. And, all of the core has muscles, fascia, ligamentous tissue, and that takes a minimum of 3 months to heal, like related to an ankle sprain or a knee sprain or whatever. It's like, you can't just go back and run at 6 weeks. Your pelvic floor is not ready for that.
Right. I think that's a huge misconception. I mean, you talked about that there, but I try and like plant that seed as early as possible. Like 6 weeks is like super unrealistic. And especially with the athletes that I work with of, all right, when do I get back to it? When can I get back to doing the things? And I want to say like at 3 months is when you can start. I mean, not start, I shouldn't say that. Like there's things you're ramping up into
More
it.
specific. Yeah.
Exactly. Sport specific.
Yeah.
And I also like that, the wording you used, especially to like the athletic minded, because a lot of times I'm talking about, you got to throttle down, we got to switch gears into pregnancy and train, but not really using your wording of like, well, we're doing a different sport, if you will, we're training for birth. And then that athlete mind like anchors onto that of saying, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to train for birth and let me do it. And then I'm going to switch gears. And that, I think, satisfies that athlete mentality that's still within the pregnant woman, that's if it's so strongly part of their identity, that can really be challenging for a woman during the pregnancy of like, I'm like, walking is not a workout for me. and feeling really trapped within that.
Yeah. And I think, a bunch of the first trimester is a big mindset shift, as much as a physiology shift and hormones adapting. We always say once somebody's pregnant, they're fully pregnant. So you're not sort of pregnant, you're fully pregnant. Like your body is doing all the things right now to shift, to take care of baby, to build a placenta, to do all the things. And I think a bit of the first trimester, aside from the adapting physiology, is a part of letting go of the identity or any expectations they may have around their sport or how they should be or how they should be competing or practicing, that sort of thing. So tears and crying are totally welcome during the first trimester and throughout pregnancy, but that letting go is huge. And then one of the other things I was going to say for the first trimester is, for athletes that are so in tune with their bodies, which athletes are some of the professional, advanced, whatever you identify as an athlete, but you're so in tune with your body that this is why I say people recognize that they're pregnant at like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, because they start to notice their training is different, specifically their breathing. They're like, this used to be easy, what's going on? And their body's adapting. And that's usually one of the first indicators of like, hey, let's take a pregnancy test.
Right.
Yeah, so totally true. Yeah. But that all happens in the first trimester, and it's a big shift. And generally, like if you want to go through trimesters, we tell women in the first trimester, it is okay to give yourself permission to nap instead of train, instead of working out. Because more times than not, we live in this society that's so productive and so go that we feel guilty for taking a nap. And our body is doing so much in the first trimester, and especially around weeks 6, 7, 8, there's a lot that's being developed inside baby. And so being able to nap and rest is so critical. So prioritizing sleep, recovery, that's huge. And then being able to have a conversation when you're training, or nasal breathe, like breathe in and out through your nose. Those are some of the biggest markers we look for throughout pregnancy, but most importantly in the first trimester, because we don't want to like gas ourselves. Excuse me. We want to be able to breathe. We want to be able to have a conversation. And one of the greatest tools is, am I breathing in and out through my nose? If I'm not, then I'm going too hard.
Okay.
And then I would say the other thing is, if you're at a standard gym or CrossFit gym doing some kind of high intensity interval training, add much more rest. Intervals are still fine, but maybe instead of 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off, it's 60 seconds on, 2 minutes off, so that you can adequately recover.
Right.
Recently, we partnered with Whoop, which is,
I don't know that.
Yeah, I'm like, so this little recovery band. It's
Okay.
not a watch or anything. I never know what time it is, but this guy is a really great recovery tool,
Hmm.
and it monitors sleep, heart rate variability, respiration rate. I'm trying to think if there's any, I'm sure there's something else I'm forgetting, but this is an awesome tool just to kind of keep you in check also,
Huh.
as far as like intensity goes, and is your recovery adequate enough to train hard? And one of the things that we see right when women find out they're pregnant also is that the recovery, I'll try to pull mine up here, is it's in the yellow or the red. Like this is usually what, this is the yellow over there. My recovery's not that great, but that's usually in the red or the yellow in the first trimester, depending on how much sleep and recovery they're getting.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been super interesting.
Right.
The other thing I would add for the first trimester adjustment is that we live or have lived in a predominantly masculine energy fitness world and nutrition world, where everything is measured by numbers and or like percentages, and that's, you know, very masculine energy structured. And when we become fully pregnant, we are called into this most divine feminine energy. And so a lot of what we do at BirthFit is, you know, based on sensation and based on feeling, like how does this movement feel in your body? And that gets people out of here and into their body. Like, oh, this lunge actually feels really good on my hips. Or, oh, I feel really strong doing these elevated push-ups, you know, sort of thing. And I mean, sensation, everybody's going to feel different things in their body, and different movements are going to feel good some days, different other movements are going to feel good other days, because every day in pregnancy and postpartum is different. But I like to add that little bit just because some people have a hard time of letting go of numbers or loads or weights or times and things like that. Yeah. Where none of that matters right now.
Right. Well, what a great training then for actual labor, right? To be able to feel what is working well and what isn't, and having, you know, knowledge of different tools to be able to tune in with your body and baby to know like what's going to work best. That's a great start.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so once we kind of shift gears in that first trimester, the second trimester is usually practice, and, you know, practice cultivating your intentions, your desires. So once we figure out, okay, we shifted in the first trimester, we discover maybe what your birth desires are or what you want in your birth experience, how you want to feel. And then we practice that. Maybe we say affirmations or mantras during training, or we set an intention each training. And we just kind of like, as if you are training for, you know, a sport, that's literally what we're doing, mind, body, and soul. And so second trimester is usually the fun bit, where, you know, you get a burst of energy again.
Yeah, you get your second wind.
Yeah, totally. Your body's adapted. Your physiology is kind of like leveled out. Baby's not huge like the third trimester, but you got a little bump. People know you're pregnant, your belly's growing, but you feel good, you're glowing. And usually this is like the most fun training. And it's also a little bit like the time where you can like push yourself a little bit if people are into that. You know, this is the time wherever we get messages and people say, oh, I accidentally hit a personal best. And we didn't tell them to, but they were feeling good. And so they lifted and they're like, oh, that was the most I ever lifted. Wow. We're like, oh, wow. Okay. So we're like, oh, wow. Let's not do that again, but those things here. We usually train, we prefer strength and conditioning to happen 2 days a week minimum, and then at the most 4 days. And then any of the other days, active recovery. And this will give your body, basically your nervous system, adequate time to recover.
Okay.
And our training looks like, let's put it in a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So Monday, we may do a lower extremity focus, maybe a heavier load type of day. Tuesday may be an upper extremity, heavier load type of day. And then we would take off Wednesday. And then Thursday would be lower extremity, maybe a volume day. And then Friday would be upper extremity volume type of day. And then we would have maybe an active recovery day on Saturday and a complete rest day on Sunday, ready to start the week again on Monday. But heavier loads and volume are key. And if you think about, and heavy and volume is relative to anybody and everybody. It's relative to whatever level you're starting at. Being able to have the strength in your legs and your core and your body to push baby out, but also the volume, the endurance, the muscle endurance, so that you can last on your legs for 3 days if birth is 3 days. Right. And then pushing is 3 hours. Who knows? Right. One of the things we say is we have no idea how long birth is. It could be 3 hours, it could be 3 days. And that's going to ask basically everything of you. It's going to need every energy system. It's going to need every, type of muscle endurance. It's going to need the long endurance. It's going to need the short, quick, fast pushes like you would see in like a heavy lift or a sprint. So it's going to demand a lot of you.
Yeah. And you're training for all of those things. Thankfully.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And then once like third trimester comes around, do things switch, or is it just, what does third trimester look like that's different than the second?
Third trimester usually starts around weeks 26, 27. And this time I really love, and you'll love it too as a chiropractor, but as we transition from second trimester into third trimester, this transition bit is where I love to make sure we're doing all the things to get baby and mom in position for labor. Mm-hmm. And from all the research I've read, baby can start to get in position for birth as early as 26 weeks. Okay. And this is awesome because our programming, or what we tell people, is like, get on hands and knees, do high bear, do downward dog, do all the things, to not be in the same position and to play with inversions, come back to vertical, play with inversions, come back to vertical, to encourage baby to go head down. And usually around weeks 26 to 27 to 32, we're really playing in different planes of motion so that those ideal birth positions happen. Yeah. And then, around weeks 32, 33, that it's full growth mode, if it hasn't happened already. And then this is usually the time where we call it deloading or tapering. And we call it that because it relates to athletes, but it's the time of nesting, chilling out, moving just to move and feel good in your body. Okay. And, for somebody that's been training 4 days a week, they may go down to 2 days a week and then walk every other day. They may just do 20-minute flow sessions with the Birthfit basics, daily, and 2 days a week of strength training. It kind of looks different for everybody, and what feels good in their body will be different. But it is deloading volume, it's deloading life, it's, chilling out, and just focusing on movement that will enhance range of motion, maintain range of motion, and allow you to feel good and sensual in your body at that time.
Good.
Yeah.
Because so many women, especially in those last weeks, there's a struggle within them of letting go, letting their strength go or their training go, and listening to their bodies and saying I'm just too tired, and if they can understand that's all actually part of the process, in the same way you would taper or deload, as you said, before the big event in order to be rested going into that event, then maybe that would allow that to sink in a little bit more and
Mhm.
like looking at birth in this way.
Yeah. And I think, when we're in tune with our bodies, like you said, our body will want to nest, our body will want to
Mhm.
calm down. And, I've had a number of people say, like, I just don't feel like working out today. Is that okay? I'm like, yes, go take a nap.
Right.
And oftentimes our bodies will prepare us, like our body is telling us to nap because we might go into labor 3 days later or a week
Yeah.
later, and you're going to need those energy reserves.
Right.
For
Totally.
sure.
Well, and that's one
Yeah.
of the things I love about your programs, that it isn't just like an exercise protocol. You do have the
No.
mind, the body, the soul aspect,
Mhm.
and the intuition and the like transformation aspect of it and the sacredness of it, as well as like these are your 4 days of working out. You right? It really it
Yeah,
really
yeah,
speaks to all those things.
yeah. And I think, what bugged me so much about birth in America was that there we had kind of, I don't disrespected birth in the process of it.
Mm,
And we have taken away the sacredness of it. But I totally think there is a way that we can honor birth and the experience that it is, and still have, our modern day life, our modern
yeah.
day training, and I think that's that's where my wheels started turning. And you know me wanting to do fitness exercise different than anything I'd ever seen, you
Right.
know
Yeah,
yeah.
because I mean, there's so much out there that's either this is just work out and then figure out the birth later and pretend like you're not
Yeah.
pregnant, or don't do anything because you could damage yourself, like interrupt the birth, more to heal from postpartum. And then you have women going
Mhm.
deconditioned into birth and then even deconditioned into postpartum, because there's that aspect of being
Totally.
healthy during the pregnancy for yourself and for baby, and then also for birth, but then also setting yourself up for mamahood, right? To being
Totally.
strong and able to recover well, and then also launching into postpartum and being healthy maybe for the next pregnancy, or just being
Absolutely.
healthy yourself.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. I think, part of the reason we train is the empowerment piece as well.
Mm,
And building confidence in a gym space or a yoga space or wherever you're training, that transfers into daily life so much. And imagine, and you've seen this, and probably a lot of your audience listening, like feeling confident, you're able to say no, you're able to stand up for your values or your priorities a lot more. And that is so critical in birth in the hospital in America.
yeah.
Being able to, have know what you want and know what you don't want.
Right.
Um, and gosh, it's a shame that we have to fight for ourselves, but that's been kind of my biggest thing, is like, this isn't just fitness to keep you in shape, it's also giving you empowerment tools so that you're able to make your own informed, intuitively guided choices and feel confident in those choices. You're armed with confidence
Yeah.
anywhere you go in life.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And
Yeah.
that, I mean, that makes sense too, that if you can listen to yourself and say no to a workout today because I'm too tired, then you can do the same thing like in labor of
Hmm.
saying no to like if an intervention that might be pushed or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. Never
Totally. And
thought of it that way.
and you're able to approach, birth has so many forks in the road. That's what I like. Okay, maybe we get to a fork in the road and it's been 24 hours and we're deciding if we want an epidural or not. Like, okay, that's a fork in the road. You've been here, you've been breathing hard, you've been challenged before, you've kind of felt what this feels like. Can
Hmm.
we make it? And you're much more in a place of, I mean, it is a place of peace, from all the, births that I've attended as a doula. You're much more in your body and you're able to kind of think risk, benefits. Nope, I want to keep laboring. I'm good with this. I'm exhausted. Let me get some food and see how I feel.
Yeah.
Or no, I really feel like I'm suffering. Let's get an epidural,
Hmm.
that sort of thing.
Right.
So I think it's, yeah, much more, you're able to make much more, um, value-based decisions at those forks in the road in labor, because you've practiced little things along the way, for
Right.
sure.
Well, and my thoughts come to like, I mean, the same is going to be true for postpartum, like
Yeah.
when your body's feeling itself needing to rest more, or that call of like, all right, let's get moving again. And I want
Yeah.
that. I'm craving it more than just like going for a walk with the baby. Like my body's calling me to move. And with our last minutes that we have, I love to talk about like postpartum, like those kind of
Yeah.
recommendations, because that is something, I mean, we touched on it before about the unrealistic expectation of 6 weeks. I think is something that like the more women can know going in, that marker is not something that you should feel shame for if you're not feeling up for exercise or sex, because it's
Yeah.
really, really uncommon too.
It's completely random, but
Yeah.
so one thing we recommend and we're super strict with is a 30-day lie-in period.
Mhm.
And I did not used to be as strict like early on in my career, but now like 30 days lie in. And generally what we mean by this is 2 weeks horizontal, laying in your bed. You have food that's either been, cooked, frozen before, or you have a meal train going. But your only job as mother is to bond with baby and to figure out that breastfeeding relationship. Skin to skin as much as possible. These skin to skin breastfeeding, rest, and nourishing foods, this is going to heal your body much more than any workout will.
Mhm.
This will shed the weight much more, like way quicker than any workout will. I promise you, I've seen it for many, many, many cases. After 2 weeks, then people get they're like, okay, I need a little something.
Yeah.
So then we're like, okay, move around the house. Walk to the mailbox and back, walk to the end of the street and back. And usually that's enough. Like once they get vertical for, extended period of time, then sometimes bleeding comes back or it picks up. And so they're like, oh, okay, I felt it. This is also the time where we say, if you can get back to your chiropractor, go to your chiropractor if you haven't been yet. And usually, that one outing there and back is like a whole day's field trip, and it's enough.
Right.
Yeah, and if you haven't had any body work or anything like that, get somebody to come to your house. House calls for body work are great during this time. But 30 days lying in, focusing on bonding with baby, breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is like a two-way relationship. It's a skill. It's something you got to figure out. It's going to be easy some days, challenging the other days. And just probably very similar to me, like I did not grow up seeing like breastfeeding happening in my house.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure for most of the people, it's, a whole new skill, a whole new concept. After sometime around the 3-week mark, the 4-week mark, or even the 5-week mark, this is where people are like, oh, I want to move. And so I usually tell people baby wear. And when we baby wear, we have baby facing us close enough to kiss, and they're supported in that squat position, but they're all like tucked in here. Baby wear for a walk and do it for 20 minutes. See how your body feels.
Mm.
If there's no increased bleeding, pain, or discomfort that day or the next day, then go for a 30-minute walk the next day. And ideally, we build up to a 30 or 45-minute baby wearing walk 3 or 4 times a week. Okay. And then I would say start the BirthFit Basics postpartum program, which is online. And this is all foundational movements, no equipment, okay. Foundational movements that we as humans are designed to be able to do. And it starts with breath work and these basic human movements. And these basic
is it
human
core like pelvic floor specific, or is it more general functional?
Yeah. So here's the deal. I'll try to be really fast with this. Yeah. So our breath, our diaphragm breath, uses our diaphragm and our pelvic floor. Whenever we inhale, both of these things naturally lower and expand. Okay. When we exhale, on a regular breath, regular human diaphragm breath, when we exhale, everything naturally returns back to neutral. So we inhale and then we exhale. Now, the second breath, which we call a stability breath, is task-specific intra-abdominal pressure. And that's creating that stabilizing, that, oh, I got to stabilize to pick up baby out of the bassinet or the crib or whatever. I got to stabilize to do the dishes now. It's the same breath, but a much lesser version. Like if somebody's going to come and punch you in the stomach, like you're going to brace all the way around. So the task specific or the stability breath starts the same way. We inhale, everything lowers and expands. But on the exhale, we maintain that eccentric contraction of all the abdominal muscles and the pelvic floor muscles. And so that's how we stabilize. We have to have all the intersegmental spinal stabilizers working, all the muscles. And then we also have to have our internal pressure system working, creating that task-specific intra-abdominal pressure. So the really cool thing is I did not learn any of this core stuff in school. I did training with DNS, the Prague School of Rehab. And what I learned was based on developmental kinesiology, which is basically developmental kinesiology is watching babies, speaking of humans, go from their most, basic laying on their back, thumbs in, and then being able to move, happy baby, roll over, get up to a tripod, crawl, oblique sit, go through all those movement milestones. And what I wanted, this is where I was going with this, is babies are born with a diastasis rectus abdominis. They're born with an ab separation. And they start to approximate or heal or close their abs by incorporating all the crossbody slings. And so when they learn to roll over and then they learn to crawl, they're using the different fascial trains or muscle patterns of their body. And so that's what we go back to. The only difference is we start to incorporate this with weight bearing, because as humans, we're the only bipedal mammal that, our pelvic floor has to bear load at some point. We can't crawl, the rest of our lives. Although that might be a little bit more functional, we have to be able to walk. The breath that we use, we incorporate that into every movement milestone. And these are the basic human movement milestones, and we incorporate that into the postpartum program. And that's the foundation that we say everybody's got to have. And then you can go back to training. But if you can't do tripod and create a breath, a stabilizing breath there, what makes you think you're going to be able to throw a ball adequately in, a very advanced tripod type of position?
Right. That's fascinating about like baby development. I never knew that about the baby's diastasis. And
isn't that crazy? Like when I heard that blew my mind.
Yeah, I've never heard that. And it makes perfect sense that then, okay, if this is how babies close, I mean, they're not trying to close it, but it's happening. Then if that natural sequence of things is how a baby does it, then let's adapt it to the situation in adulthood. That's so cool. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah. And God, what was I just going to say? Oh, and that's like, if you watch babies move and they go through those milestones, babies start in the sagittal plane. That's where they learn to stabilize first. Like being able to be in happy baby and breathe. That's one of the first stabilizing like positions. And it's so cool. Like we always tell moms, especially in class, like, hey, you're doing this and your baby's doing this too. Y'all are doing this together. And that blows their minds.
Right. That's so cool.
Yeah. And then they learn to move, and they're motivated to move, like all babies, no matter where they're at in the world, whether it's Japan, Texas, San Diego, Italy, anywhere. But if you leave them, on a nice little rug with some toys, some blocks, they're motivated to move because they want to grab that block over there, or they're stimulated by something over there. So that's how they they roll over. They're like, let me grab this, let me get that. And that's how they learn to evolve, through different planes of motion. They gain confidence through different planes of motion, and they stabilize. And babies are the best movers. So we don't learn from them.
Totally right. Yeah, I mean, there's like watching kids move. I do think that all the time. Like, man, I wish I moved like that. Because
Right.
it's so effortless, you know. They'll just like they run to their pile of things and they squat down, and I'm like,
It's
man, I haven't been
perfect
able to
squat.
do that in
Yeah.
forever.
Perfect squat. And then their bear position, they can like
Yeah,
move so good in bear. Oh,
right.
yeah, they're
It's so
amazing.
cool. Well, and so then from those basics, then that's when you would, you know, I don't want to say allow, but like within, once they can do all those functional movements, then they'll be
Yeah.
ready for getting back to whatever they were doing before. Because I
Mhm.
think that's a main thing. Moms will understand, okay, I know I need to like ramp up, but I don't know what to do
Right.
to ramp up. And with that 6 weeks, going back to that same thing, it's almost like, okay, at 6 weeks, I wait, and then I go back to what I was doing 2 months before I got pregnant. And then that's just
Right.
a recipe for disaster. So I
The
like that you have
recipe
that
for
sequencing.
disaster. Yeah. So we take 30 days of lying in, and then 4 weeks or 30 days of the BirthFit basics. So that's 2 months postpartum. And then we would start the BirthFit postpartum training, which is introducing more dynamic movements or
Mhm.
coupled movements, and a lot of tempo work. We love unilateral stuff, tempo work. Tempo work meaning like 3 counts down, like maybe you're doing a squat, so it's 3, 2, 1, hold the bottom of a squat, stand.
Okay.
So tempo work is so good for joint and joint integrity.
Mm,
And like we mentioned early on, relaxin is circulating, you know, through the pregnant body. And even still during postpartum, as long as mom is breastfeeding, there's going to be some relaxin there. And just being like tempo work, unilateral work, like single arm presses, single leg stuff,
mhm.
that's going to help with proprioception and balance, and telling your body, giving your body like, hey, we're here in space now, you know,
Right.
we're okay. And then just strictly strength work. So, like lining up, one of the things we look at is rib cage on top of pelvis, being able to stack those things, whether we're pressing, whether we're hinging, whether we're squatting. We want rib cage stacked on top of pelvis through the whole time of postpartum training.
Right.
And you know, when we get back to sport specific, that's not going to be the case. Like if you're hitting a volleyball or you're running or you're playing, like rib cage is not always going to be stacked on top of pelvis. It's more for the rehab purpose of
Right.
everything.
And
Yeah.
then that launches you into that later on down the line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally. So, you know, people always ask, how soon can I run? Or when can I do like a CrossFit class? And my general response is at the earliest 3 months. You
Okay.
know, do the line in, do the BirthFit basics. If you're game, do the BirthFit postpartum training with us. And then, you know, that gets you through 1 month, like the whole third month. And then try running, then try CrossFit, then try Orange Theory, go back to your track workouts, your volleyball workouts, whatever.
Right.
We've done a lot of work with coaches for, you know, professional athletes. Like if they're a professional athlete, they have their whole team.
Mhm.
And, you know, as people transition back into their sport, at least for a month, we usually work together and make sure there's no signs of pelvic floor dysfunction, no aches or pains, and it's just open communication there.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah,
Well, gosh, you just so much we covered. It's so great. I mean,
I
there's
know.
totally so many other things that we could talk about as well. I love it. Thank you so much for bringing all of this. And I'll definitely have all those resources in the show notes and the like at birthfit.com. And looking at everything that we talked about as far as these programs and everything is online now, right?
All our programs are online, yeah. And then
Fantastic.
we have a podcast. We have lots of blog information. And then if there's something you can't find and you need an answer to, don't hesitate to email us. We always say, let us know, because I guarantee if you have the question, somebody else does, and
Yeah.
we'll find information and we'll write a blog on it.
Right on. Right on. Yeah. And I'll make sure that's all involved too. Like, and definitely notes for your podcast, because it's another great resource.
Thanks.
Wow. Well, Lindsey, thank you so much. I totally appreciate it. It's great
Thank
to
you.
connect and have this conversation. And I
Yeah.
just want to say, like, over the years, I've just seen what you've been doing, and I really appreciate like what you've done. I appreciate what you're doing, the whole educators program that you're creating. Also, you're just doing really great things, and you made a big difference. So I want to acknowledge you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dr. J.
And don't forget, I have 2 free offers for both moms and dads. First, for the moms, I have my 40 ways of connecting with your baby during pregnancy that you can get on my website at drjwarren.com/40ways. That's 40 ways. And for the dads, I have the 9 myths about becoming a dad that is also available on my site at drjwarren.com/9 myths. That's the number 9 myths. So both moms and dads are covered. Go check them out. I hope you enjoy them.